All right, hello and welcome back to yet another video. This is your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, and today we're going to be looking at the cyber kill chain, which is a part of the SOC analyst pathway, and it's an introductory path, but I have not done this, as you can see. So we're going to go through this together, and hopefully I will be able to answer these questions relatively quickly because it seems like a big module, this one. But yeah, this is it. This is kind of a really important one. And I remember studying this as I was studying for my CYSA certification, which I got, and I'm very, very proud of. And this is going to be very common, as you see, right? So recon, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and whatever your goals were, you finally take action on them. And I have gotten pretty good at a lot of those things, and some of them I have not even done because, you know, you want to be able to do it in a controlled environment. So that's the really big thing when it comes down to doing any kind of pen testing or attacking, right? So the term, and so we're just going to jump into the intro of this right here. The term kill chain is a military concept related to the structure of an attack. It consists of target identification, decision, and order to attack the target, and finally the destruction of the target. That's a kill chain in military terms. Thanks to Lockheed Martin, a security and aerospace company, the established cyber kill chain framework for cybersecurity started in 2011 on the military concept, and it defines the steps used by adversaries or malicious actors in cyberspace. So to succeed, the adversary needs to go through all of the phases of the kill chain. And so what we're going to go through is basically all of these phases, and we're going to look at them in detail. So why is it important to understand how the kill chain works? Because you'll understand how to protect against these types of things. If it's a ransomware attack, a security breach, as well as advanced persistent threats, which is what happens to a lot of organizations. It happens to governments, and this is done by multiple hackers, or like an organization of hackers, where they are super advanced and they are persisting. It's not a one and done kind of a thing. They will keep attacking until they can get in, and this is a really, really important thing to understand. So you can use the kill chain to assess your network and system security by identifying missing security controls and closing certain gaps based on the infrastructure. If you understand the kill chain as a SOC analyst and a security researcher, threat hunter, or incident responder, you'll be able to recognize intrusion attempts because they fall under various portions of this kill keychain, right? So reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, CNC, command and control, or considered C2, and actions on objectives. So what we're trying to do is learn about each phase of the kill chain framework and the advantages and disadvantages of the traditional cyber kill chain. As a result, we'll be able to recognize different phases or stages of the attack carried out by an adversary and be able to break the kill chain. So that's the whole goal of this entire room. And so let's jump into recon. So to learn what reconnaissance is from the perspective of the attacker, let's first define it. Reconnaissance is discovering and collecting information on the system and the victim. Recon phase is the planning phase for adversaries. The better the recon phase is, probably the higher likelihood you'll have to successfully attack. OSINT stands for Open Source Intelligence, and it falls under recon, and it's considered passive. So I don't know if they actually say it over here, but it's basically looking at social media profiles or anything that's available online to carry to complete recon and just do a better job of active recon, right? So it's the first step an attacker needs to complete to carry out further phases of the attack. They need to study the victim by collecting every available piece of information on the company, its employees, the company size, email addresses if they're available, phone numbers, from publicly available resources to determine the best target for the attack. You can find more about this in the What is OSINT room. Let's look at it from the attacker perspective. And here's the scenario. A malicious attacker who names himself Megatron decides to conduct a very sophisticated attack that he's been planning out for years, and he's been studying and researching different tools and techniques that could help him get to the last phase of the kill chain. But first, he needs to start from recon. In order to operate in this phase, the attacker would need to conduct OSINT, and email harvesting is one of those things. So email harvesting, and you can write a basic Python file to do this, or you can just use a bunch of tools that are already pre-made. I downloaded the harvester a long time ago, and it just downloads open source information that's available on the network. So it obtains email addresses from public, paid, or free services. An attacker can use email address harvesting for phishing attack, which is a social engineering attack to steal sensitive data, including login credentials or credit card numbers. The attacker will have a big arsenal of tools available for recon. Harvester is one, Hunter.io is another one, and then OSINT framework is another one. And these are just 3 out of probably dozens, if not hundreds of tools that are available. So attacker would use social media websites such as LinkedIn, because a lot of people put their company information on LinkedIn or on Facebook or on Twitter and Instagram. They'll actually put their emails in their bios. And you can use that to collect information on a victim that they would want to attack. And then the information found on social media can be very bad. I mean, I've heard of really scary stories on attackers finding information on social media to do some really terrifying stuff. So, you know, as a cybersecurity person, you should know this, and you should not have any of your information readily available to the public when it comes down to your social media accounts. And ever since I started social media, my actual, personal alias, I haven't even updated those accounts anymore, because I've been scared to, honestly. So that's kind of it. So what is the name of the intel gathering tool that is a web-based interface to the common tools and resources available for open source intelligence? So this is a web-based interface. From what I understand, is OSINT framework is web-based. What is the definition for the email gathering process? And I think this is also social engineering, right? Nope, it's not email. Oh, email harvesting. Email harvesting, probably. There you go, email harvesting. Social engineering is what you can do once you've harvested the emails. Got it. Okay, so that was reconnaissance. Let's talk about weaponization. So you found some information, and now you want to weaponize the information. So after a successful recon stage, Megatron wants to work on crafting a weapon of destruction. He'd prefer not to interact with the victim directly, and instead he will create a weaponizer that, according to Lockheed Martin, combines malware and exploit into a deliverable payload. Most attackers usually use automated tools, and we did Metasploit in our previous room, or in one of our previous videos. And Metasploit is one of the greatest weaponizers that exists in the market right now, and it's free, so that's pretty crazy. And then they will generate the malware, or they'll refer to the dark web to purchase the malware. And more sophisticated actors or nation-sponsored advanced persistent threat groups, which we already talked about, they would write their custom malware to make the malware, which is crazy to think about, that there's an entire marketplace of these programmers that can write this malware for you, and all you got to do is pay, I don't know, $5,000 for it, which is nothing compared if you have like a backing of a big investor that wants to destroy you. $5,000 is nothing. $10,000 is nothing to these people. So it's pretty crazy to think about. So let's first define some terminology before we analyze weaponization. Malware is a program or software that's designed to damage, disrupt, or gain unauthorized access. An exploit is a program or code that takes advantage of the vulnerability or flaw in the application. And a payload is something that the attacker runs on the system. And we did this again in the Metasploit room. So if you haven't seen it, go find it on my channel, and then just look at how easy it is to create exploits and payloads. It's insane. There's so many pre-made ones already that it's pretty crazy to do. So continuing with Megatron, he chooses to buy an already written payload from someone else in the dark web, and then he can spend more time on the other phases. So in the weaponization phase, the attacker would create an infected Microsoft document containing a malicious macro or VBA, Visual Basic for Application script. So basically, most MS documents and PDF documents, anything like that, in the macro of the file, which is the stuff that's beneath the surface that you don't see when you open the file, you can put code in there so that as soon as the person opens the file, the code runs, and now their computer is infected, which is really crazy. If you want to learn about macro and VBA, please refer to that. Intro to Macros for Script Kiddies by Trusted Sec. And then an attacker can create a malicious payload or a sophisticated worm implanted on a USB drive and then just throw it in a parking lot. There's an example of this that happens in Mr. Robot as well. Mr. Robot is a great show for hackers, by the way. A lot of the stuff that they show is pretty spot on what actually happens. And typically it's like you give it to a pretty girl. If you have a girl on your team, you give it to a pretty girl. She goes in the parking lot and accidentally, on purpose, drops the USB drive in the parking lot, and then one of the employees may pick it up thinking, oh, this girl's, she may have pictures in here that I could see or whatever, and they go and they insert that USB drive into their work computer, and that's all you need. An attacker would choose command and control techniques for executing the commands on the victim's machine or deliver more payloads. You can read more about the C2 techniques on MITRE ATT&CK framework. An attacker would select the backdoor implant, so the way to access a computer system, which includes bypassing security mechanisms. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. And so now the term referred to as a group of commands that perform a specific task. You can think of them as subroutines or functions that contain the code that most users want to use to automate tasks, but malicious actors tend to use them for malicious purposes and include them in Microsoft Office. So this is called a macro. Whoops. Macro. There you go. It's a macro. That's what it is. All right, so we weaponized. We figured out how to weaponize, and we weaponized. And now let's talk about delivering the weapon. So delivery phase for Megatron can be done in a few different ways. They have to transmit the payload or the malware. That's basically what they got to do. They got to get it on the system of their victim, right? So phishing email is the most common, right? You'll get this email that says, hey, you won $1 billion, or hey, your password has been hacked, come change your password, or a million other types of things that look legit at first glance, but then the more you look at it, it's kind of crazy that, oh my God, this is not real. The domain address behind the email looks almost identical to the company, but it's off by one letter, right? So when you do recon and determine the target of the attack, the actor, the malicious person, will craft a malicious email. And then you can do this with something called GoPhish. And instead of FISH, it's PHISH. And it's a public, it's a service that's available online, right? So you create one, they help you duplicate their landing page, and it's pretty gnarly. And then on the back end, they actually show you the captured information, right? They craft the email and target a specific person, which is a spear phishing attack, which is usually what happens, or maybe multiple people in the company. The email contains a payload or malware or a bad link, and they would learn that Nancy from the sales department, company A, would constantly like the post on LinkedIn from Scott, which is a service manager at company B, right? So they know that this is what it looks like. So then what he's going to do is they would look at, Megatron would give it a second guess that they would both communicate with each other over work emails. So Megatron would craft an email using Scott's first name and last name and make the domain look similar to where Scott works at. And then the attacker would then send a fake invoice email to Nancy, which contains the payload. And Nancy, all she has to do is just open up the invoice and the payload starts working. Distributing the infected USB drives, we already kind of talked about. In places like coffee shops, parking lots, or on the street, they might decide to conduct a sophisticated USB drop attack by printing the company's logo on the drive. That's clever. I haven't thought of that. And mailing them to the company while pretending to be a customer, sending the USB device as a gift. You can read about these things on the cybercriminal malicious And then you got watering hole attack, which is also very, very clever attack. It's basically targeted against, it's a targeted attack designed to aim at a specific group of people by compromising the website that they usually visit and then redirecting them to the malicious website of the attacker's choice. So it would look identical to the website that they visit, but it's hosted on the attacker server. And then the attacker would look for known vulnerability for a website and then try to exploit it, would encourage the victim to visit the website by sending them harmless emails pointing out that the malicious URL to make the attack works more efficiently, And then after visiting the website, the victim would unintentionally download malware or malicious application to their computer. As simple as clicking on the link. It's not that hard to do this. And the type of attack is called a drive-by download. An example can be a malicious pop-up asking to download a fake browser extension. Terrifying. So what is the name of the attack when it is performed against a specific group of people and the attacker seeks to infect the website that the mentioned group of people is constantly visiting? And it is called a watering hole attack. All right, so now we have discovered delivery. Let's talk about exploitation. So to gain access to the system, the attacker needs to exploit the vulnerability. So in this phase, Megatron gets a little bit creative and he creates two phishing emails. One contains a phishing link to a fake Office 365 login, and another one containing a macro attachment. So we already talked about what that means. That would execute ransomware when the victim just opens the file, right? Then Megatron successfully delivers his exploits and gets two victims to click on the link and open the malicious file. After gaining access to the system, the malicious actor would exploit the software system or server-based vulnerabilities and escalate privileges or move laterally through the network until they find somebody that has potential privileges. And according to CrowdStrike, a lateral movement refers to the techniques that a malicious actor uses after gaining initial access and then moving deeper into the network to obtain sensitive data. So somebody's desktop might have more sensitive information than their coworker, and all you need to do, you don't need any extra privileges to get root access. You need to just find a bunch of people in the finance department, and one of them could slip up and put information on their desktop that they shouldn't have. If you want to learn more about server-based or web-based vulnerabilities, you can go to the OWASP Top 10 room, and OWASP is for the web application security. And that's a very, very big list, and it's a very important list, is the OWASP Top 10. They update it every single year. The attacker might also apply a zero-day exploit, which means that it has never been used before. The zero-day exploit or vulnerability is an unknown exploit in the wild, and there's no record of it in any of the databases. And it exposes a vulnerability in software or hardware and can create complicated problems well before anyone realizes something is going on. It leaves no opportunity for detection at the beginning because it's literally the first time that's ever been used, and it could be something that somebody wrote that pretty much does the same activity, but the code looks different, so it can't be detected, right? So it's never been used before. That's basically what that means. So these are examples of how an attacker carries out exploitation. The victim triggers the exploit by opening the email attachment or just clicking on a link, then uses zero-day exploits software, hardware, or even human vulnerabilities. This is a huge one right here because most tech is pretty good these days about not being hacked, but humans make errors all the flipping time. Think about Ocean's 11 when they found that one security guard who was lonely and he goes to a strip club, and then the stripper got bought by Daniel Ocean and Rusty, and they paid her some money so that as she's giving him a lap dance, she takes his scan card, and they use his scan card and they make a duplicate, so on and so forth. So humans are the weakest link in the chain. An attacker triggers the exploit for server-based vulnerabilities. These are all the things that can be done. Can you provide the name of a cyber attack targeting a software vulnerability that is unknown to the antivirus? And so this would be zero-day. All right, so we now have exploitation handled. So now we want to install what we used to exploit the system, right? So as you learned from weaponization, the backdoor allows the attacker bypass security measures and hides the access. A backdoor is also known as the access point. Once the attacker gets access to the system, he would want to re-access the system, if he loses connection to it. So he creates his own backdoor. And since they get kicked out or they lose connection, they no longer have access to it. So they have to have a persistent backdoor. Will let the attacker access the system he compromised in the past, And this is in the example of Mr. Robot. This is the rootkit that they left behind on the system so that they can go back to it whenever they need to. And there's a room in tryhackme called Windows Persistence, which is also a really cool room. So the persistence can be achieved through installing a web shell on the server. A web shell is a malicious script written in web development programming languages, such as these, to maintain access to the compromised system. Because of the web shell simplicity, the file formatting, which could be any of these file formats, can be difficult to detect, and it might be classified as benign because, I mean, there's so many different files that are PHP files that are all over every computer. They come pre-installed on computers, right? So there's an article on Microsoft on various web shells. There's a installation of a backdoor on the victim machine that could be done. Meterpreter is something that's available through Metasploit, which we already used, and you can use that to install a backdoor on the victim's machine. Then there's creating or modifying Windows services. So there's a bunch of different services that are always running on Windows, and you can duplicate the name of it, put it in the place that it's supposed to be harmless. It looks like the Windows service. It acts like well, it doesn't act like the Windows service, but it looks like the Windows service. It exists where the Windows service should. So when they run the antivirus software or any kind of SIM, it looks, the name and everything looks like, oh, this is just one of the regular services. And on the MITRE ATT&CK website, it's known as the basic excuse me, this technique is known as this on MITRE ATT&CK. That's what it is. That's the name. An attacker can create or modify the Windows service to execute the malicious scripts or payloads regularly as a part of the persistence. An attacker can use tools like sc.exe, which is the service execution of Microsoft, which lets you create, start, stop, query, or delete any Windows service, and reg to modify service configurations. Then the attacker can masquerade the malicious payload by using a service name that's known to be related. So we already talked about all this. So adding the entry to the run keys for malicious payload in the registry or the startup folder. By doing that, the payload will execute each time the user logs in on their computer because it's a startup file or a startup program. And according to MITRE, this is there's a startup folder location for individual user accounts and a system-wide startup folder that will be checked no matter what user the account logs into. So this is all terrifying. You can read more about this stuff on MITRE attack techniques. In this phase, the attacker can also use the time stomping technique to avoid detection by the forensic investigator and also make the malware appear as a part of a legitimate program. Time stomping technique lets an attacker modify the file's timestamps, including modify access, create, and change times. Can you provide the technique used to modify file time attributes to hide new or changes to existing files? So this should probably be time stomping, right? Yep. Can you name the malicious script planted by an attacker on the web server to maintain access to the compromised system and enables the web server to be accessed remotely? This is called a web shell. All right, making some progress here. So we just talked about installing our malware. So now let's talk about command and control, which is basically you are remotely commanding and controlling, right? After getting persistence and executing the malware on the victim machine, Megatron opens up a C2 command and control channel through the malware to remotely control and manipulate the victim. This can also be done in a lot of different ways. So it's CNC or C2 beaconing as a type of malicious communication between CNC server and the malware on the infected host. The infected host will consistently communicate with the C2 server. That is also where the beaconing term came from, because they beacon a signal, right? The compromised endpoint would communicate with an external server set up by the attacker to establish a C2 channel. After establishing the connection, the attacker has full control of the machine. Until recently, the Internet Relay Chat was the traditional C2 channel used by attackers. This is no longer the case, since modern security solutions can easily detect malicious IRC traffic. The most common C2 channels are protocols on port 80, which is HTTP, or even port 443, which is the secure version of HTTP. This type of beaconing blends the malicious traffic with the legitimate traffic and can help the attacker evade firewalls. And then there's the DNS attacks. The infected machine makes constant DNS requests to the server that belongs to an attacker, and this type of C2 communication is also known as DNS tunneling. It's important to note that an adversary or another compromised host can be the owner of the C2 infrastructure. So what is the C2 communication where the victim makes regular DNS requests? And it is called DNS tunneling. Okay, almost done. So now we have control of the machine or control of the victim. So now what we want to do is basically do what we originally wanted to do. Do we want to exfiltrate data? So do we want to collect credentials from the users? Do we want to perform privilege escalation, which means gain access to the domain admin, or from a workstation by just exploiting the configurations? Internal reconnaissance. So once you're inside, do you want to do more recon so that you can gain further attack vectors, right? Lateral movement. So do you want to go from one user to another, to another, to another until you can find what you're looking for? Do you want to collect and exfiltrate sensitive data like copyrighted information or client files or banking information, right? Deleting the backups and shadow copies. This is also really important. Do you want to delete backups and any copies of their shadow files? And the reason why this is important is that once you've deleted all their backups, you can crash their systems and then they go out of business, basically. Shadow copy is a Microsoft technology that can create backup copies, snapshots of computer files or volumes, and you can overwrite or corrupt data. So this is typically done by a competitor. A competitor hired a hacker, and they tell them, this is what I want to do to destroy this business, and then you essentially just kind of destroy the business. Can you provide a technology included in Microsoft Windows that can create backup copies or snapshots of files? And this is already given to us right there, shadow copy, that's what it is. All right, so what we're gonna do is now we're gonna practice something, right? So we're gonna open up the site, and we're gonna just try to see what the responses are, and then what we need to do is get a flag at the end, right? So each item on the list in the correct kill chain entry form, so add it to the entry form, then check answers to verify whether the answers are correct. Wrong answers will be underlined in red. Okay, so what am I doing here? All right, so we're gonna try PowerShell for this, and to be able to deliver the malware, it would need to be some kind of a spear phishing. So spear phishing attachment. And to be able to exploit the machine, they would need to, this one I kind of feels like exploit is in the answer. So exploit public facing application, and I think we have to like type it identically to what's in there. And so once we have that, we need to install whatever we got. So linker hijacking, and a C2 command and control would be some kind of a fallback channel. And finally, exfiltrating the data, we need to get data from the local system. Let's see if that's right. Okay, that is actually right. And here's our flag. We can copy the flag, paste it into here. And so the whole idea, just to kind of be able to understand why these responses are the way that they are, we can go back and read everything again, but it's conceptual, right? So the first level is to weaponize, and to weaponize something, and this is not assuming that like recon has already been done, because they only gave us 6 responses, right? So 6 answers. So to weaponize something, we can use PowerShell to do it. And then to be able to deliver it, we need to send it to somebody so that they can click on it. And the delivery aspect of this is under the social engineering. So it could be phishing in general. And so the phishing attachment, the spear phishing attachment, goes to one particular person, and then they click on that damn thing. And now that they have the attachment, they've clicked on it, we need to exploit it. We need to actually exploit their machine using our payload. And that's where the exploit the public facing application happens, right? Then you need to install whatever you got, and that would be hijacking. You would hijack something once you've done the installation, and that would be the dynamic link hijacking. And then the command and control, the C2 server or the beaconing, all of that stuff, you need to create a channel, and that's kind of where that connects to, is that you've created a channel that you can fall back on. It's called a fallback channel, but it's basically a channel that communicates back and forth between your machine and their machine, or your server and their server, or excuse me, your client, their server, etc. And then once it's all done, you need to extract the data. And so you're taking the data from a local system and you're extracting that data, which is all the credit card and debit card accounts that were extracted, right? So it's essentially, what it seems like is that they jacked all of the credit card information that people had used to make payments to Target, which is a really big deal because they get the credit card numbers, they get the potential PIN numbers if they're attached to it. If somebody used it as a PIN transaction, they would get the security code on the back of the card, so on and so forth. So this was our little practical exercise. And last but not least is the conclusion of the kill chain. So it can be a great tool to improve network defense. And is it perfect? No. The traditional kill chain, or Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain, was last modified in 2011, which is a long time ago. And it was designed to secure network perimeter and protect against malware threats, but the cybersecurity threats have been drastically advanced since 2011 because hackers don't sleep, man. You just make new ones all the time. So it's a good framework, but it's not perfect, right? And you need to keep that in mind. Since the main focus of the framework is malware delivery and network security, the traditional kill chain will not be able to identify insider threats. So if somebody works for you and they decide to screw you over, it pretty much falls out of the scope of this thing. The insider threat is the potential for an insider to use their authorized access or understanding of an organization to harm the organization. It's serious. And that exists. That happens all the time. Think about the disgruntled employee that got fired, and they think that they were unfairly fired, and now they have all the insider information on your company and how you do things. Or they maintained friendships with their old friends, and they have the email addresses of their old friends. And you got to understand, it's crazy stuff, and it's very real. So don't just rely on the traditional kill chain model, but also refer to the MITRE attack framework as well as the unified kill chain, and find a more comprehensive approach to do this thing. And this is very, very, very important to understand. So this was our cyber kill chain room inside tryhackme. This is unfortunately a subscriber only room, but you watched this video, so you got really good information from it, so you don't necessarily have to go get it. But I highly recommend you go and get it, because this is a really, really important room, and it's a part of a very important pathway, which is the SOC analyst, the SOC security operation analyst. So I hope you learned from this. This is your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers. And definitely make sure that you go ahead and like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on the notification bell so that you get notified the next time that we drop something. And yeah, definitely get yourself a membership to tryhackme. You can use the link in the bio, in the description below, to get yourself a discount, because there's a lot of paid rooms that, I mean, it's just super affordable, but you get an extra $5 off anyways if you do this. So there's that. And yeah, happy hacking, happy analyzing, and I will see you in the next video. Talk to you later.